Yo, yo, it's time to discover the flow. Shout out to the bros. You know, I like to welcome everybody to discover the flow. No matter how you discover the show or discover the bros, now you about to see how far we can go, because it's time for discover the flow. Yeah, cowabunga do. You know live is how we come to you. Turn the levels up when you hear the boys coming through. The Pod Squad giving you just what you need, hitting you with a new special guest every week. Don't you dare hit skip, man, it's Tristan and Kip. DTF Pod about to take you on a trip. Mega Ran bring the heat, yeah. But be clear, I wasn't even supposed to be here. Welcome to Discover the Flow. No matter how you discovered the show or discovered the bros, now you about to see how far we can go, because it's time for Discover the Flow. Let's start the show.
So far today, sir?
So far, it's been good. Thank you. How's yours?
Good.
Not too bad.
Pretty interesting day today. Got through work thinking about this all day long, so I'm surprised I managed to get what I needed done.
Well, good.
This has been a long time dream interview for both of us. We've both been.
I was going to say, but I see it doesn't matter to you. That since you said this was casual, I'm wearing a T-shirt.
Yeah.
I see that
Good.
you are doing the same thing. So
Good. We're actually glad. I was talking about that a couple minutes ago. I was like, oh man, we're wearing T-shirts right now. He'll probably show up dressed nice or something. And then I was like, oh, thank gosh, T-shirt. All right.
Yeah,
and I can hear your beautiful wife laughing in the background.
you can.
I do have questions about her, so if she wants to sit in at any point, she is more than welcome.
You may hear her, but I don't think she's going to want to sit in. But
Oh, she doesn't have to, but we're going to talk about her because I mean she's pretty awesome herself.
I agree.
Thank you.
And
Where about in the world are you guys?
We're in Los Angeles.
Okay,
California.
all right,
Where are you guys?
excellent.
Where are you guys?
We are actually just outside of Chicago in a town called Naperville.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I believe I read something about you doing some work or something. You worked at one point in Illinois.
Are you talking to Mike or me?
Yeah.
Mike.
You're talking worked at some point in Illinois. What does that mean? You mean as in a film, or worked?
I read something about you working at a grocery store in Illinois or something like that.
No, not me.
Oh, all right. Well, hey, you never know.
That's
You
right.
never know what's true and what isn't out there.
The internet
So.
is full of horrible rumor and innuendo. So
Yeah. So
And we're
anything, if we get anything wrong, just tell us we're wrong and we'll move on.
okay.
So I always like to start off with this question, especially when we have an actor. How did the acting bug originally get its hands on you?
I was raised in West Hollywood, California. My dad worked in the studios, so I always think kind of you work in the lumber yard. You live near the lumber yard. You go to work in the mill. I went to school with Natalie Wood when I was in grammar school, and in junior high with kids who were in movies and or television, but then it was more movies, I guess. And I had an older sister who read movie magazines, and of course I would look through them and look at the pictures of the girls. And saw that there were young people in motion picture and television business that were getting a lot of attention. And I thought, God, that's interesting. So, all of those things kind of came together. My dad working in the studio, he brought home one time a picture for me from Natalie, as though we knew each other. We were in, I think it was the second grade together, so it's not like we really knew each other, but it was, it was kind of a magic about it, living in that area and being having proximity. Proximity is everything, as Brian Stevens said. So.
And you had mentioned your father worked for the studios. He was a carpenter, right?
Right. That's right.
And now was he building sets? Is that what he was doing?
He wasn't a set builder, you know. I'm not frankly sure what he was doing. He told me that he had worked on some props, and he had probably been working on building up sets. Sure. Today, today that's a grip, you know, or a prop man. But he wasn't a prop man. He would have been somebody working with the prop department. He was a laborer essentially, and that was, he got to work in the studios, and in the studios you work your way up, and if you're good, in more meaningful jobs, I guess.
Interesting. So obviously one of the things that you are best known for is your time on MASH, but as a younger man, I read that you spent a couple of the years in the Marines.
Well, I spent some time in the Marines, and the two don't connect.
Didn't help you in any way later on, without knowing?
Well, I knew military stuff, but we were playing guys who were there reluctantly, and well, of course, I was in.
Yeah.
Having volunteered, I got very reluctant very quickly in the Marines.
When I was in my early 20s, I actually got approached by a Marine recruiting officer, and I had nothing going on for me at the time. No kid, no girlfriend, didn't like my job. And I remember saying, I'll join. And the guy looked at me, and I had just this at the time, just that. And he tapped my arm and he goes, "Sorry, you're damaged goods." Whoa. Nowadays, they would take you. It doesn't matter if you have
now they're covered head to toe in tattoos.
They'd probably put the tattoo on you.
Yeah. But I was like, oh man,
I got USMC.
I got turned down by the Marines in a McDonald's. That's degrading.
Damaged goods. Jesus, that's weird.
Right?
What year was that?
I was 21 and I'm 43 now. So that was around. Yeah.
Well, that's early 2000. Jesus, that's weird.
Yeah. Early 2000s.
That's very weird.
I never understood that.
No, that might have just been him too. That was.
Yeah, that sounds like an idiot.
I think I would have gotten bored with it as well, or at least probably not exactly conform to the structure the way I should have. So it might have been for the best.
Yeah, I was born into a Navy family, so everybody served in my family except me.
Well, the Marines and the Navy were very closely related, although.
Oh, I've heard plenty of things.
I've heard they don't like it when you mention that, though.
No, Marines. They don't. Nobody likes it
on either side.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I've always wondered why that is, but nobody really wants to talk about it.
I've heard the term squid from one side to the other, and the term seagoing bellhop was my favorite one. Was what the Navy called the Marines at the time. My dad served during Vietnam, so that was.
Oh well, bless him.
So, getting to what we obviously want to talk about here. You joined in the fourth season after Wayne Rogers had left.
Yeah.
And I've heard you talk about, that they came and talked to you and a few other people about it. When you found out you got the role and you decided to take it, did you ever speak to Wayne Rogers about, what you were stepping into or anybody else ahead of time?
I didn't know Wayne, and met him only after I'd been on the show for a while. It was certainly the first season I was there, but I don't remember exactly how long I'd been doing the show. But it was on the air. I mean, so that I make the point because I remember going into an event. There were a lot of things going on, and as there always are, but a lot of things going on in Hollywood at the time that had either political or significant meaning and purpose. And I came into the room. It was a theater, and a lot of people were there. And I walked in, and straight ahead of me, about half the way down, was Wayne Rogers talking to somebody. So I just walked down and stopped beside him, and he finished his conversation with whoever it was. And he looked over at me and he said, I'm getting tired of people thinking I'm you. And I laughed at him and I said, yeah, I've got the same problem. And he, hang on just a second. George, I'm doing an interview. I'll have to call you back. Yeah, goodbye. And George wanted to do the interview too. Anyway, we had that exchange, and he said, I got to tell you something. He said, one time I met Elliot Gould. Elliot played Trapper John. And we talked for a while, and Elliot said, are you doing me or are you doing the other guy? And Wayne said, I'm doing you. And Elliot said, I liked me better, which is very, very much Elliot Gould. And I laughed, and he said, Wayne said to me then, he said, I just want you to know I like you better. And I thought that was really a classy thing to say. I didn't ever get to know Wayne very well. He passed during the time we were doing the show, and I believe, and he had moved away down in Florida. Wayne was an extraordinary investor counselor. He handled a lot of people's money and invested them in things and did very well by them. So I remember Alan told me one time, sometimes the show would, doing film, things go wrong and things go late. And Wayne would say, come on, guys, this is costing me money.
So how difficult, or was it difficult, walking into an already established, very established cast? You walked in with Alan Alda, Loretta Swit, Larry Linville. All these people were already established and together and had been working together for 4 years. How did you adapt to that, I guess, would be the best way to ask that question. That's a rough situation to walk into.
It was scary. Well, I was scared. Can one say shitless on your show?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good.
And say whatever you want to.
Okay.
We're going to ask you a question later. That's it. It's okay to curse.
Okay. Yeah, I loved the show. I was a big fan. I didn't think, obviously, it was on the air for 3 years while I was doing other things. And it was something I admired. And coincidentally, one of the casting directors, I was under contract to Universal for a while, and under one of the casting directors there stopped me on the lot. He said, "Oh, Mike, I'm leaving. I'm going to go over to 20." I said, "Oh, really? Where? Why?" He said, "I'm going over to 20th Century Fox. I'm going to do a show over there with a friend." And there was Burt Metcalf, and he became our executive producer eventually. He was an associate producer for a long time. He was a casting genius for the show. And he eventually became, when Gene left, he became the exec producer and directed a lot of the shows. Terrific guy. Anyway, so, I didn't know what the show was he was doing or whatever. And I was at that time under contract at Universal. I'd done a show there with Tony Quinn, and then that show failed. I wasn't surprised. Tony was just too big for the screen. So they got me in a bunch of different things, one good movie and a couple of different shows. And I was kind of knocking around, not very much aware of what was out there other than what Universal was having me do or that we could fight about. And a friend of mine, and I was supposed to have dinner with him, and he called me and said, "Let come on over to my place and pick me up, and then we'll go." And I knocked on his door, and he said, "Okay, I can't leave right now. I got to watch this show. Come on in." And it got with the end of my favorite show, Come On In. So I came in, and it was MASH. I had never seen it. I guess I knew it was on the air and had heard about it, but I had never seen the show. And I was just blown away. There was a scene, I will never forget a scene with Gary Berghoff, Radar. The craziness of the situation, and this kid, this naive kid off the farm, and the bombs are going off, and everybody's trying to talk to everybody over in whatever the circumstances were. And I was just knocked out. I thought, oh my God, what a wonderful show. How terrific. And we went on, and I just remember that. And then year maybe later, I started watching the show. And maybe a year later, a producer at Universal said, "I'd like you to just star in my series. Would you? I hope you'd be interested." And I said, "Well, thank you. That's very nice of you. I'd like to read the script." And he gave me the script, and I read it. It was really not very good. Kind of a joke show, not the sort of thing I was looking to do. And we had a meeting, and I said, "Thanks, but this is not for me." And he said, You're turning down the lead in a television series?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess so." And he said, "Why?" And I didn't want to say I thought your script was stupid. So I said, "Well, it's not about anything. Like MASH. MASH is about something." And
MASH has substance.
Oh, man. So shortly after that, my agent called and said, "There's some interest in you having a meeting over at Fox. There's talk about Wayne Rogers leaving the show. Would you be, I said, would I be interested in meeting with him? Absolutely. Can I? I'm under contract here at Universal." And he said, "It's not going to hurt to have a meeting." So I did. We met once, and I was just as nervous as a cat. And we talked about a lot of stuff. And I did say the one thing I wouldn't be interested in doing is being Trapper John, stepping into Wayne's boots, essentially. And they agreed. They said, no, we have a different idea for a character. You can be married, going to have a child at home, not going to be a womanizer, etc. And I said, God, look, at that time I'd been in a soap. I'd been in 2 television series and had major roles in 2 television series and done a lot of other things. And I was just as scared as I could be because I loved the idea of being part of this show. And I stumbled and fumbled and felt like an idiot and was clumsy in the meeting. And I said, at some point, I said, I hope you understand. I'm just nervous because this is the kind of show that every actor wants to be part of. So I went away, and then they called back and said, "Would you come and do it? Would you be willing to do a screen test?" And they said, "Not about whether or not you can act, we know that, but a screen test with Alan." And I said, "Yeah, well, sure, I would." And I did, met him that day. And again, I was just as nervous as hell. And Gene directed it. Gene Reynolds, one of the major producers of the show. And Alan was great, and we got along, and we did the scene, and I went away thinking, I don't know, I mean, it's a comedy. I remember driving out of the studio saying to myself, it's a comedy, stupid. You might have tried to be funny. And we went on, and I got a call. I guess it was the next day. You got it. And I thought, oh my God, is that possible? And it was possible. And I got a call from Alan Alda. He said, I'm thrilled that you're going to be coming to do the show with us. Are you available to have dinner tonight? And I said, absolutely. And we went and met at a restaurant in Hollywood and talked about the show and about him and his hopes and dreams for the show. And it was really wonderful. But I kept thinking, the word in town about the show was that it was like a family. Everybody loved each other. And I thought, man, I'm not sure the rest of the cast is going to be too happy about the guy coming in to replace their friend Wayne. But Monday morning, after having had my fears calmed a bit by Alan, I went on set, and first person walked up, stuck out his hand, welcomed me was Gary Berghoff. Then came Loretta and Jamie and Bill and Larry. It was a wonderful, wonderful opening, kind of development of a relationship that just never stopped being wonderful. It was just fabulous.
Well, and it was Wayne Rogers' decision to leave the show, so it's not like they fired him and you're taking his job, No,
and you weren't replacing his. You weren't taking his role. You were being introduced to it, and became a wonderful character. I mean, an absolutely wonderful character.
Thank you. Yeah, they were. I remember them saying in the meeting, talking about BJ being different from Hawkeye and Trapper, and what we want him to be, not a womanizer, be dedicated to his wife and his child at home. How do you feel about that? And I remember saying, you asked me if I'd be comfortable portraying fidelity on national television. Yeah.
Yeah, and on that note, BJ had a daughter.
Did.
And her name was Erin.
Correct.
Was that your choice to name her Erin?
Yeah.
Because your daughter's name is Erin?
Exactly right. Yeah, Gene asked me, he said, you got any ideas? This child's going to have a name. I said, how about Erin? He said, great idea.
You also got to work with your late wife on there as well. What's that like? Like, I've never worked with a spouse before, let alone on what at the time is the biggest show possibly in the world,
Well, they were great. They gave, they had a cadre of nurses, Kelly Nakahara being number one, and a group of other women who were technically extras. They didn't have lines most of the time, although they gave Kelly lines a few times. But then they would hire actresses outside for certain particular episodes where a certain type was needed, or just to kind of bring in somebody else. And Judy, my wife at the time, was an actress. She and I had worked together on the stage, so there was nothing difficult or unusual about her being there. So it was great. It was just having an opportunity to be in a situation. I don't know. I remember she was in scenes with Alan. I don't remember that we ever had a scene together for all the times that she appeared on the show. I mean, we may have. I just don't remember it.
Your wife Shelley, who's sitting off to the side spying on us, she did. Correct me if I'm wrong. Not only was she on a massive show of herself, Coach, but she did 3 movies with Elvis.
That's correct.
Does she ever throw credentials around just to get you to do whatever you want? Like, yeah, I get it. You were on MASH, but Elvis, come on.
No, listen, yeah.
Yeah. Now take out the trash, Mike.
I can't tell you how many times I used to do a lot of speaking around the country. And wherever I went, men of a certain age would come up to me and say, "I hope you don't mind my saying I'm in love with your wife." And I said, "No, I understand. I am too." But yeah,
I mean, we saw the mustache you used to rock. She probably got that from some women over the years as well.
Yeah, the mustache was incredible. That was an epic mustache.
Oh, you like that? My mother hated it, and people comment about it. People say, "Why did you decide to grow a mustache?" And it was simple. Alan called me. I guess it was second or third year I was there. He called me up and he said, "Look, Mike, I must have been shortly after I don't know, it was second year." He said, "Mike, they think we're too much alike. What would you think about growing a mustache?" I said, "A great idea." So that was it. And we played with that. That was fun.
I seem to remember a lot of shots being taken about that mustache.
Oh man!
Over the course of the series,
the comb, and the little they gave me the little the little tiny comb, and then at the end of the show? I know it was near the end. They pulled the trick on me and shaved off.
And that is my favorite episode, possibly, because you spend the entire episode torturing Alan Alda's character with him wondering how you're pranking everybody else and what's coming for him, when in actuality you weren't pranking anybody but him. I love that episode. I've watched that probably about a dozen times. It's fantastic. But yeah, I remember you waking up and him looking at you laughing, and the camera cuts to you and your I don't remember if it was half gone or all the way gone.
Half gone.
I think it was half.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a fantastic
truly stupid with half a mustache.
Yeah.
We've done stupid stuff like that too. So him and I have been best friends for about 25 years, and we've done independent wrestling shows over the years. And just a couple of months ago, we did one where we held him down and shaved his head in front of an audience of about 400 people.
Yeah, I was bald. I was bald in October. Not bald anymore, but I was bald in October. That wasn't funny.
So how did you and Miss Shelley meet, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind at all. It's one of my favorite stories. I've been involved in a lot of things politically, and I was in Central America in the 70s and the 80s. Every year, it used to be, I guess not that way anymore, but every year the network used to have what they would call an affiliates dinner, and that would mean bringing in the people from various stations around the country that were affiliated with the CBS network, and treating them to a gala and a dinner and a lot of information about the upcoming seasons. And they always invited actors from their famous shows to be there and, pal around and say hi and be part of the crowd. And in 1980, I think it was, I had been in Central America and came. The circumstances were refugee camps and terrible, awful political situation, and I was really kind of messed up by it all. And I came home and remembered that I'd made this commitment to be at this dinner in San Francisco representing MASH. And I thought, Jesus, that's the last place I want to be and the last thing I want to do. But I said I'd be there. So I walked in this big room where before things got started, the celebrities, the stars of all the shows that they wanted to have there were in this big room, actually kind of two rooms. And I thought, God, this, talking show business is not something I want to do now. I'm not particularly happy to be here. What do I do? And I looked around and saw this young woman, and I had met her 5, I don't know. I met her in 1970 when I was doing a show called The Interns. She came on to do a guest role, not with me, in fact, but with one of the other actors. But we met, and I thought she was just gorgeous and really sweet. And she remembers that all I wanted to do, my son had just been born, so I was walking around carrying pictures of my little baby boy, and so we said hi. And then after that show was over, I did the show with Tony Quinn at Universal, and she periodically was doing shows at Universal, and we would see each other in the commissary, and it was mostly nice to see you, how are you? Because I always thought she was really, beyond being gorgeous, really sweet. And I saw her, and I thought, this is somebody I can talk to. And I walked across the room. I remember she was talking to somebody, and I was very rude, tapped her on the shoulder, and I said, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm Mike Farrell. And she, oh, hi, Mike, how are you? Nice to see you. And we just started talking. And she rescued me because I was halfway out of there. And then they assembled us, and they said, okay, you folks, we're going to line you up in alphabetical order, and you'll come out and you'll be introduced to the assembled crowd. And as it turns out, her letter, Shelley Fabre is F-A-B, and my name is F-A-R. And so we were right next to each other, and we walked, we were in line, and so our conversation kept going. And I asked her if there was anybody in particular she was interested in meeting there, and she said yes. Walter Cronkite, and what was the other guy?
Charles Osgood.
Charles Osgood? Osgood. Two news guys.
Man, she couldn't lie and say Mike Farrell.
No. And then we were, I was off to my assigned table, and she went off to her assigned table, and we had the dinner, and people were yucking it up. And we left. We got up to leave at the end, and I sort of sought her out. And as she was walking out, I said, hi, did you get to meet the people you wanted to? And she said, I got to meet Charles Osgood. And I was so starstruck. She said I couldn't talk, but she got a chance to talk to him and to be with him and be introduced to him. And I said, did you meet Cronkite? And she said, no. And I said, well, I'm taller than a lot of these folks. I'll look around, see if I can find him for you. So it just kept us together. And we didn't find him, but we were continuing to talk, and we walked outside, and this is a hotel in San Francisco at the top of right next to the top of the Mark, at the top of the hill, California Street. And we got out of the hotel, and the hotel they had put us in was across the street. And as we came out of the hotel, I saw a cable car come up and stop right there in front of us. And I said, would you like to take a cable car ride? And she said, oh no, I can't. She had a relationship with a guy she was in. And I said, I can't. And then she said, oh, well, no, why not? So we got in this cable car, and we rode down the hill and around down to Fisherman's Wharf. And I was spilling my guts about the situation I'd been in Central America and what I'd seen and how much I hadn't wanted to be at the event where we were, but how grateful I was for her and for being such a sweet person. And then we talked, if we got out, and we walked around down by the pier, and then we walked back to the hotel. And I thanked her and said goodnight. And she went off to her room, and I went to mine. next morning, we were to be picked up in limousines and taken to the airport to be flown back to LA. And as I got out there, she was there, and there was a car, and the guy said, "Okay, you two, you can get together. You can take this limo to the airport." So we got to talk. I got to talk a little bit more, and it was, I didn't want to let go, of course. And when we parted company, I said, you were interested. I don't know how interested she was, but about this stuff that you said that you might like to know more. I'm supposed to be speaking on this subject to a group in Los Angeles next week. And if you and your fella would like to come. And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we already have plans." But she said, "If it ever happens again, please let me know." And we had exchanged phone numbers. So 2 months later, I think, I called and I got her answering machine. And I said, "Hi, it's Mike Farrell." And we had talked about the possibility of you coming to, I'm going to do this presentation again out in Glendale. And if you and your fellow would like to come, I'd be happy to see you. And I got a call back on my answering machine, and she said, "Oh, Mike, thank you for calling. Yes, I'd like to come, but would you mind if I brought my sister?" And I said, No, I wouldn't mind that at all. And she
What
did.
she doesn't see was you going like this on the other end. Yes. Yes.
Yes. So she did. She brought her sister, and we afterward I said, "Would you like to have the two of you like to join me for a cup of coffee?" And we did, and we had conversation, and there's a piece she always remembers. As we were flying down from San Francisco to LA, sitting next to each other on the plane, she said, she was talking about a situation. She was doing One Day at a Time then, the show with Bonnie Franklin, her pal Bonnie Franklin. And she said there was some issue going on with the writers, and she was really upset that they had mistaken something that she had said or wanted some clarification with something. And I just remembered that. So when we got together again this time now, and we're with her sister, and we're sitting at a restaurant over a cup of coffee, and I said, "Oh, did you ever get that problem resolved?" Thinking about the writers deal. And she said, "Oh, we're not seeing each other anymore."
Man, I thought you were being smooth, but she had moves too.
She got it on lock.
And I said, "Okay." I'm sure I was very, very cool about it, but wow.
That time she saw you fist pumping. That time she yes. She saw it that time.
So
I love that story, actually.
That is a fantastic story. I love that. Meat stories are always really nice.
Yeah.
There's always cool things that happen for a lot of people with those. But getting back to your career,
That.
Yeah, that thing that we're kind of talking about. There were two different locations during MASH. There was the set, the actual set, and then there was the ranch.
Yeah.
Did you have a preference on those? Which one you preferred to work in, or was there?
The set was easier to get to, but the ranch was fun. We always had a good time. For me, that was 8 years of just bliss in so many ways. I didn't care where I was. If I was associated with that show and those people, it was fabulous. So you had more. No, you didn't. We fooled around on the set, and we fooled around out at the ranch. We just had fun.
I had a question for you because I was wondering this. I recently went on a trip to DC, and one of the things I wanted to see was I wanted to go to the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
And look at all the stuff from TV history and everything. Unfortunately, when I went, the tickets were sold out for the day.
Oh,
but
bad.
I know they have the signpost in there, but I also know in the last episode, you're riding away on a yellow motorcycle with part of the signpost in it. Did
Right.
you actually keep that, or did that go with the signpost?
It's up there on the wall.
Oh,
awesome.
So please tell me there's a big blank spot in the Smithsonian where it would have been, because that would be awesome to know that.
They may have replaced it when they gave it to the Smithsonian. I don't know.
That brings me to another question I was going to ask later on. I know you're a motorcycle enthusiast.
Yeah.
Was that you riding down the hill at the end, or somebody else? Because that guy almost ate shit.
He certainly did, and so, I told Gene, the director of that particular episode, Gene Randall's the producer of the show, wonderful, wonderful man. And I rode the bike to Alan, and I on the back rode up the hill and did all that stuff. I said, Gene, I can do that. Going down, and he said, Mike, I understand you can ride, but if anything were to happen and you broke a leg, we'd be shit out of luck for weeks while you healed. We just can't take the risk, so we've got another rider for you. And I said, okay. And when I saw what he did going down, I thought, oh boy, am I glad he's doing it and not me.
Yeah, that guy was all over the place. I was like, holy crap.
This came up in conversation when we were doing research. What type of motorcycle was that? Do you even remember?
It was an Indian.
It was?
Yeah. At time, appropriate time, 40-something Indian that they rented from some yard that it provides vehicles for movies.
That final season, was there a fire that took out part of, if not all of your set on the ranch?
Yeah, big fire, and they used it in part of the show. It did a lot of damage, and that was a shame.
Now, you wrote and directed several episodes, didn't you?
Uh-huh.
Which episodes do you remember which episodes those were? Or?
Oh yeah, I remember some of them. The first one I remember because when it's a story I like to tell. When the day that I went, my first day there, after we had did all the hello and how are you and nice to meet you and stuff, we sat down around a table, which we did at the beginning of every episode, to go through the script, and we just read it sitting around the table, and the writers were there and some of the producers, and wanted to make sure everything kind of worked. And Gene said, okay, page 1, and we started reading and read, and I heard actors, and later on I did it. I'm getting ahead of myself. So we read through the script, and there was applause from the writers and producers. And then Gene said, okay, page 1. And I looked at him. I thought, didn't you just say that? And didn't we just do that? And he said, oh, Mike, because I was a new guy. He said, Mike, now we go through the script again to see if you guys have any questions, thoughts, ideas, suggestions. We'll go through page by page with that in mind. And I thought, oh my God, I think I've died and gone to heaven. They want to hear from actors about their roles and about the script. In my experience prior to that time, That was not the way most directors or producers worked. And that for me became ingrained, and because we did. I mean, there were times when I'd hear, one actor, or myself sometimes, say, maybe if we did this, or I think this line would work better if Bill said it as opposed, that sort of thing. And they'd hear you out. And when we'd block the scenes, we'd ad lib a line. And if the line worked, they'd say, we'll put that in. And if it didn't work, they'd say, okay, thank you, but no thank you. So what they did was create what I think of as a creative community. They just wanted us to be invested in the show and in part of the show. And they wanted to hear from us because they trusted us. So one, I don't know, year 2 or 3 or 4, I got an idea for a show. And I went up to Burt Metcalf, the fellow I had mentioned earlier, who had been a casting director and was now one of the producers of the show. And I said, Burt, I got an idea for an episode. And I ran it by him. He said, that's a great idea. Why don't you write it? And I thought, I've written some things, but the quality of the writing on MASH is not something I pretend to have. And he said, no, go ahead. He said, we have a writer's room. Everybody does it. Whenever you you write a script, you come in and you sit down in the room and people talk about it and make ideas and make suggestions. And so I said, okay. And I wrote it. It's called The Yellow Brick Road. It was a story about, mostly about Father Mulcahy in a foot race. And I don't remember some of the others. One was about a hell of a show about a big battle, and a bunch of wounded came in, and it was near the end of December. And this guy, we were sure he was not going to make it, and we decided we were going to do everything we could to keep him alive until after midnight, so that his family wouldn't have to live with the fact that he had died on Christmas Day.
I remember that one.
Yeah. So
a lot of very beautiful episodes. Very beautiful episodes.
Yeah. That was an idea that they had that they gave me, and I worked on it. I directed it as well.
I have a quick question for you that's triggered by something you said earlier. Well, before that, let me phrase it. Had you and your wife met before the show had ended or after?
Oh, yeah. No, we had met in when was that, sweetie? 80. The show ended. We met in 80. And the show ended in 83.
So did you take the San Francisco part of the sign? Because that's where the two of you met?
Yeah.
Ah, you old softy.
Oh, yeah.
I had to look up. I was like, what part of the sign did he take? And I saw it was San Francisco. I was like, son of, all right. I think I see a connection here. For lack of a better term, sir, that's romance.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well done, sir. Well done. That doesn't exist like that anymore. That's some serious thinking.
Yeah.
It was great.
I have another question that it's going to take a second to get to, because I got to remind you of this. There was one episode where there was a gentleman on the front line who was getting young men injured and killed needlessly trying to take hills. And he comes to the MASH unit to check on his soldiers and tells them that, they're needed back on the front line ASAP, get back there, soldier.
Yeah.
And I remember Hawkeye and BJ decided to take matters into their own hands to put this guy out of commission for a little while, give people a break. But BJ decided that he couldn't do that. He couldn't live with it morally as a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, what does it take to get to the point where you feel like you know your character so well that you can speak on their behalf morally and know what they would and wouldn't do, honestly.
Well, you hope, I think one hopes that the investment in a character takes you to certain places. In fact, the script they wrote, BJ and Hawkeye did the surgery. And the script, as I mentioned earlier, we could talk about the script when we're going on the first day. And everybody said at the end of the script, a big applause, and we laughed. And I said, I got a problem. And they said, what's that? I said, BJ wouldn't do that. And Alan said, Hawkeye would. And I said, I got no problem with that. I'm just saying, BJ, the character I understand, would not cut into a healthy body, just for that kind of ulterior purpose. And it resulted in a really quite extraordinarily extended discussion that morning. And finally, Burt Metcalf said, you know what? We've got a better script here than we have on the page. Let's just do that and have BJ be able to express his opinion and take the position he took, and let Hawkeye go ahead and do it. Sorry. Sweetie, let me call you right back. My daughter.
Her ears must be burning.
Yes.
Yeah. So, that was a moment, and it was a test, because these guys prided themselves on what they wrote. But Burt got it. He said, "No, you're right. This is you know this character, and he wouldn't do that." And God bless you. So we went forward with it the way we shot it.
So you had mentioned that Alan Alda was the first person that really reached out to you when you got the role on MASH.
Yeah.
Is that where your friendship really kind of took off? Like, I know you guys have been friends since then.
We have been and will continue to be. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that was the beginning of a relationship. But we grew to really love each other on the show. Alan is a very competitive guy. And I am, I guess, fairly, one might say. So we played chess, and I beat him, and he hated it. And we played Scrabble, and sometimes I beat him, and he hated it. And if I could do 30 push-ups, he would struggle to do 31. And we just had a ball, actually. I used to trip him on the set. We'd walk in, they'd call us. We'd be sitting in our little shelter while they built up, set up whatever the shot was that we were going to do. And I'd walk in behind him and I'd trip him. And one time I tied his bootlaces together.
So do you feel like your friendship and your relationship kind of informed the friendship of BJ and Hawkeye, or?
Yeah, no question about it. No question about it. Here, I will. This to me says it all.
I like that.
I feel that picture. I feel that picture right here.
Yeah.
I have a couple of friends that are like that. And
that was taken on the set the day we ended the show. Alan's wife took that picture.
I got to ask this because we just have a few more questions for you, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. Was there really gin in the still, or what was that? Because the still is legendary. I mean, it's a character on the show itself,
When the still got taken down, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see what's over Kip's shoulder, if you want to show him. This is actually from the 80s. I still have the packaging for it.
Oh, that's very funny. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the still must be at the museum in DC too. No, it was water. You can't drink gin and remember lines.
Well, I mean,
Sorry.
you never know what somebody might hide on a set like that, you know?
No, listen, I've been on sets where there was a problem with that sort of thing, but not on the MASH set.
I heard a story about them running over the tent with a tank, and you trying to adamantly convince them. They'd be like, "No, no, I can jump to safety in time. Come on."
It was Gene had this idea. Alan was in the Jeep in a tank, and I guess it was went crazy, and it was going to run down the swamp. And I said, "Here's a here's a thing we could do. Instead of all of us running and fighting our way out the front door, I said, if we just the swamp was made of netting on the sides, and 2x4s held it. And I said, if we just cut the 2x4s every inch, if I ran and dove through the screen, it would break, and when I could roll out, and it'd be sort of a dramatic scene." And Gene said, "Are you crazy?" He said, "What if you fell? What if you hit your head on the 2x4 and bounced back in?" Anyway, it was funny.
Oh, the belief in yourself during youth,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
So, what are your thoughts, kind of between the movie, comparing the movie to the show? I assume you saw the movie.
I sure did. Yeah,
it was a very popular movie at the time.
Loved it.
The movie versus the show. What?
It's a different animal. We took the spirit of the movie and left a lot of the anger behind. I'm going to commit a movie sin here and say I can't remember the name of the director, but he hated the show. The director of the film hated the show. And because you can't do on television what you could do in a motion picture, and we didn't particularly want to. We wanted to have a show that dealt with the same issues, but dealt with them in a way that was living room. We pushed the limits a bit, but living room accessible.
There was a lot in that movie where I feel like that it wouldn't exactly fly today,
right?
But MASH itself, the TV show, that's, you guys have such a better platform because you get to tell your stories over time. You get to to not drag it out, but like form everything in the characters so well, as opposed to we only know these people for 2 hours.
Yeah.
But on the show, we live with these people for 10 years,
Yeah, you have 10 years of character growth and changes and real life happening.
Yeah, and I have to say, I get mail every day from people who talk about how much the show means to them and how much the thing has almost become a cliche. I watched your show with my dad, and now I'm watching it with my kids. I watched it with my grandfather, and now I'm watching it with, it's just my grandkids. It's just amazing how the show has lasted and how the really extraordinarily crafted relationships have spoken to people. And the message, I think, continues to be perfect. War hurts. Blood is not spilled without cost. I remember Harry Morgan, when he came to the show, how thrilled he was to be part of it. He said at the end of the show, excuse me, I still get, you may have noticed, I still get misty when I'm talking about the show. Harry said, somebody said, with the 20th Century Fox set up a news conference where we were all asked to answer questions and speak about the experience of having done the show at the end. And somebody said to Harry, he talked about the show and how much it meant to him, and then said, "Do you think it made you a better actor?" And he said, "I don't know about that, but it made me a better human being." There isn't a lot more you could say about a show than that.
Well,
No.
MASH was very formative for me as a person. When I was a kid, when MASH came on, we went to bed. That was our bedtime. It was 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock in Chicago. Go to bed. And then as we got a little bit older, we always listened to it. We always heard the theme song. We always heard some of the acting going on. But when the time came, me and my sister got a little bit older and said, "Can we watch MASH?" It was it started out as a way to stay up a little bit later, but to me, it became part of my daily ritual. Go in, watch MASH, go to bed. That was just my daily ritual. And even now, I'll still go back and watch the whole 10 seasons over and over again. I've probably watched it 7 or 8 times total in my life from start to finish.
Yeah, I had a similar introduction myself where, and for a long time I didn't even know MASH was in color, because when I was a little kid, I just had a little black and white television in my bedroom. And the 3 things I loved to watch when it wasn't cartoons, while I was in my room as a kid, I loved to watch Adam West Batman. I loved episodes of I Love Lucy, and I'm convinced Lucille Ball was my first crush growing up, which is not bad, bad. And I like to watch MASH, and it wasn't anything that I watched with anybody else. It just happened to be one of the shows that came on, and it was scattered here and there. But then as an adult, I was like, oh, I remember this. I want to check this, and then, like I said, television and streaming and everything, because it used to be on Fox every night before you go to bed. And now on Netflix or Hulu, different places, you can catch the entire series and everything. And it's one of those things. It's been like comfort food, and we can't interview Lucille Ball. We can't interview Adam West. So to still have someone as important and special as you here to sit down with us and talk with us, that's a big thing for us. So we appreciate this highly, sir, for you to talk with us today.
I had a good time, and I will say I loved doing the show. Loved the people, loved the relationships we had, and so I'm always thrilled when somebody wants to hear about it.
Well, we're going to wrap up today with a little questionnaire that we like to do. It was invented by a gentleman named Bernard Pivot and perfected by Mr. James Lipton. And we're not very good at what we do, so we steal from someone who already did it better.
If somebody did it better, we steal it and use it, because why improve on perfection? So
go ahead, Kip.
What is your favorite word?
Love.
What is your least favorite word?
Hate.
What sound or noise do you love?
A child laughing.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Horns honking.
What profession other than your own would you like to try?
Psychotherapist.
And what profession other than your own would you not like to try?
Almost anything.
Creatively, what turns you on?
On or off?
On.
On. The ability to mix it up with someone who's willing to mix it up.
And in the same vein, what turns you off?
the opposite, people who are closed and aren't willing to mix it up.
What is your favorite curse word?
Fuck.
Told you we let people swear all the time. So. And final question here, and one of my favorites. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Hey, Mike, finally. Nice.
Well, hopefully you're waiting on that one for a long time. So before we let you go, we weren't sure how to end this today, but early this afternoon we thought of what we thought might be the perfect way. So we just want to say, Captain Hunnicut, before you go,
we've been thinking about it, and there's a little something we would like to give you.
It's not much, but it comes from the heart, sir.
Thank you. Oh.